Do you want to be ahead of the game for the latest in arts, music, cuisine, and entertainment across the Middle East's most dynamic capital cities? Al Monitor is proud to launch our City Pulse newsletters, focused exclusively on local news, starting in Riyadh, Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Each week, our on-the-ground writers in these cities cover the latest cultural happenings and trends, so you have everything you need to know for the best local experiences. To subscribe for free, go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and sign up on our newsletter page.
Welcome to On the Middle East, Al Monitor's podcast on the big and interesting developments in the region. My name is Amran Zaman, and today I'll be talking about Turkey's seemingly unfettered drift towards full-blown authoritarianism. For decades, the opinion of Washington and the European Union on Turkey's human rights record did matter for Ankara. But in recent years, relations between Turkey and the West have been stripped down to pure transactionalism. My guest today is a Spanish member of the European Parliament and its rapporteur on Turkey, Nacho Sánchez Amor. Welcome to our program.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So you are one of the loudest and probably loneliest voices still speaking up for human rights in Turkey in the European Parliament. And you've become, I would say, or maybe you always were, an increasingly fierce critic of the European Commission over the way that they seem to be turning a blind eye to the violations in Turkey. Can you please explain to us why that's the case? Why is the European Commission so silent on this assault, for example, on the main opposition CHP party, something that you've been very vocal about?
It's true. I'm not very happy. I'm not happy at all, because sometimes the Commission uses a complete different language depending on the countries. For example, Georgia. Georgia is living a very speedy process of backsliding in democratic standard. And we listen from the Commission and from the External Service a very high level of criticism. But exactly is happening the same, for example, the prosecution of the oppositions, the imprisonment of the opposition leaders, exactly the same. But we never had the same tone, the same stance coming from the Commission. And this is shameful.
And why? Why is that the case?
Because they consider, and they are completely mistaken, they consider that at the current moment, European Union needs partners and friends in a geopolitical international arena in which there are a lot of problems, a rising of authoritarian, and they consider that they can in some way downgrade the demands linked to the principles and values and to conduct the policies more on the realpolitik approach. Meaning, okay, we need friends. It's better not to use the proper criticism, because they think that could damage the relation or create bad mood. I have to say, and I have to be very clear, as you said, I am very critical, openly critical, loudly critical, and never happened to me not to have open channel to the authorities.
But you mentioned the accession process. You said Turkey is trying to join the European Union. But I mean, isn't that accession process dead? And isn't that in some ways a relief to the European Union, because it gets them off the hook? They don't have to criticize Turkey when in fact they don't have any real meaningful offer on the table, at least as Ankara sees things. So it's a very cynical kind of exercise in the end, where, as you described, realpolitik is in play. The rules-based world order seems to be collapsing, especially with President Trump now in the White House. So what hope is there for, people in Turkey who want their country to be a full democracy? What hope is there for all these people who are being jailed? You are speaking up, but what impact in the end does that have?
Well, you are right, and I used to use the same expression you mentioned. It's cynical. It's cynical in what sense? This is an accession process, as any other accession process, designed to conduct to the target of the membership. But this particular accession process is going to live eternally without delivering the theoretical target that is the accession process. Why the accession process has not been closed? Because the civil society in Turkey, that's for sure. It's true that there is no any kind of political will to approach the principles and values and to conduct the accession process in the direction of maturing the democracy and having the conditions to join the European Union. That's true. There is no political will in the authorities. But at the same time, I always receive the message, please don't close the door. Don't kill the hope. Try to maintain the accession process, even if it is frozen, because maybe in the future, the political situation in the country, it could be different. And then to revive or to resuscitate a dead accession process is going to be quite complicated. What the authorities are offering to the public opinion or to the citizens of Turkey is the model of society of the authoritarian countries, meaning Putin or Russia. Do you really want to live in Russia?
Looking at the situation today, and somebody who's obviously been very closely involved in Turkish politics as a rapporteur, are you hopeful that things can change? I mean, the main opposition party that once, was seen as part of the system, as almost part of the state, is now under full frontal assault. We have at least 13 mayors either under detention or in jail. And there seems to be a concerted effort to dismantle this party, paving the way, clearing the path for President Erdogan to continue to rule over Turkey. I mean, you mentioned Putin. We all agree that Turkey is not Russia. But do you believe that at this stage we're sort of heading towards that kind of a model? And what can be done to stop that? What can people like you do?
Well, we want to help the society to keep this hope. And at least this is a thing, even if in your elections, I know very well your elections. I have been leading election observation in your country from the year 15 on. I know for sure that the elections and the campaigns are very unequal. And there is a complete abuse of the state resources. But the process of voting and counting is more or less clear and guaranteed, even if the campaign is not. That's for sure. How the media is acting, 90% of the media is only serving as a mean for the palace to convey the message to the public. But as at least every Turkish citizen has the right to vote. And they show in the past that they vote freely. And for that reason, CHP won the elections, the local elections. Meaning, at least, even if the elections as a whole are not equal, are not competitive in the sense that it is in other European countries, at least the fact of the vote is more or less protected, as some late results showed. Meaning, okay, maybe it could be a political change. Maybe before and after this attack of the AKP on CHP, the CHP is really reacting and really deciding between or how to combine these two souls, nationalist at the same time reformist or pro-European. And I think if there is political will, maybe the accession process is starting to be functional to help reform, as it happened in the first period of the AKP. The AKP used the accession process to get rid of the old Kemalist pro-European and elite with the complicity of the European Union, meaning the accession process was conducive to conduct some reforms in the first period of the AKP. The sincerity of the adherence of AKP to democracy is clearly on doubt, because after gaining some things using the European leverage, they start to be fully authoritarian. What happened after, it's linked to some discouraging narratives from some European countries. Cyprus as a problem never have been solved, and lately, after Gezi, in my view, a clear drift of AKP towards a more authoritarian model, and it's happening in Gezi. I would say it was not the coup, it was Gezi, and after Gezi, we didn't receive any single good news from Turkey regarding democratic standards. Not one reform, not one improvement. On the contrary, harassing the journalists, prosecuting the NGOs, interfering in the judiciary, using the prosecutors as a political arm. Whatever you can choose. You can choose the period.
But then, he's doing this new initiative with the Kurds. So on the one hand, as you say, we're heading towards full-blown authoritarianism with the decimation of any opponent. But then in parallel to that, the government has opened these talks with Abdullah Öcalan and seems to be promising constitutional reforms. So isn't that a bit of a paradox? And how is that received in Europe?
Well, we receive with hope the starting of this process, but the process has to be sincere, because we had experience on similar process in the past that will simply finish when somebody considered it was used and it was not useful ahead. Meaning, we have to know, is this process being conducted just for the sake of the constitutional reform, allowing President Erdogan to be a candidate or not? But this is a question that has to be solved, because the same that the CHP was conducive for some political harassment on the HDP, now the DEM could, I hope not, could fall in the trap of being entangled with the president and the AKP, with the lure of the accession of the peace process, just to, let's say, to leave the role of the preferred prey to the CHP. And then my rationale is, only when the opposition has been united, as it happened with the big cities, they were able to defeat the AKP. And for that reason, any move conducting to the division of the political forces, pro-democratic forces in the country, has to be assessed very carefully. In my last visit, I talked to the leadership of them, and we talked about these perspectives. And I think they are right. They have to try to use this opportunity to try to have some improvement. But one of the things that I have to point, even today, in which Öcalan came out with another statement, is in the first statement of Öcalan, it was clearly stated that the struggle is not about the rights of the Kurdish people, but the right of every Turkish citizen, because the framework that this claim is trying to create is a general democratization process of the country. Meaning the rationale is not right to my people, but not right for every Turkish citizen. Because if you don't have a democratic framework, any gain for the Kurdish people in terms of identity, cultural, media, education, could be immediately disappear. Only with a democratic framework, these rights are reassured and are protected. If you don't have a functional constitutional court, that kind of rights could disappear.
But I mean, even as Öcalan was making his video, the European Court of Human Rights delivered a fresh verdict on the
Demirtas,
status of Selahattin Demirtas,
Yeah.
again pointing out that he needs to be freed immediately, and yet nothing has happened. So how can we square that with this claim that it's not just about a deal for the Kurds, but something for all of Turkey? Because by the same token, of course, we all know Osman Kavala as well, not a Kurd, a Turkish citizen, has been unjustly jailed since 2017. And the European court says he needs to be freed, and Turkey is just completely ignoring all of that. So is this a big theater that's being played, or what's going on?
I visited the three of them. I visited the Demirtas in the year 18. I think I visited more recently, last year, I think Osman, Kavala, and finally I visited Imamoglu. There are many other people in prison. I don't want only to appear talking about the three, but the three are very prominent for different reasons. It's true, but I don't want to pamper you in the sense of everything is in the hands of the European Union. We can't substitute the political will of a country. We open the door of the membership of the European Union. We offer Turkey the best thing we have. We didn't offer a strategic partnership, an agreement. No. We offered the best thing we have. It's the jewel of the crown. It's to be part of our club.
Today's transformation of the Middle East is at the center of global geopolitics. Whether you're an analyst, diplomat, executive, or academic, you need the best reporting and analysis to understand what's really happening on the ground and what it means for the world. Al-Monitor is the award-winning independent leader in Middle East news. From Riyadh to Beirut, Abu Dhabi to Doha, and Baghdad to Tehran, our team of over 100 expert journalists report daily on the top stories driving the regional trends. Download our mobile app and subscribe to Al-Monitor to follow what leaders and decision makers are reading every day. Go to almonitor.com, that's AL-MONITOR.com, and use promo code POD25, POD25 for a discount.
You use the word sincerity, and of course, a lot of people doubt the sincerity of that invitation to join the European Union when just days after Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy said, oh, by the way, you'll never be able to join.
That's true. But before Nicolas Sarkozy, the candidate status was granted. What's the problem? The problem is somebody thinks it's not our duty to do things properly. And this is an excellent alibi not to democratize the country. Meaning, you only want to be a democracy for the purpose of being member of the European Union? Or you want to be a democracy because you consider democracy is the best political system in the world? But only to conduct political reforms for the purpose of approaching Europe is not a good approach.
No, I understand, but I don't think we can hold the Turkish people responsible so much as their leadership for that.
No, but don't doubt about the political will. There was Sarkozy, and Sarkozy is an excellent alibi. But after Sarkozy, we had many other politicians doing things. You know what's the problem? Nobody needs to come out in Europe saying we don't want Turkey on board, because the Turkish authorities are doing the whole job by themselves. This is the problem. Austria always has been reluctant. Nobody in Austria come out saying we don't want Turkey. Why? I have to go out and say about Turkey if Turkey is doing the whole thing, not being democratic. But if Turkey really start to do things, it's going to be tougher for many to explain why not. But if Turkey is not doing the homework, nobody feels the need to come out and to express some reluctances. And this is the problem.
There's a common understanding in Turkey, or perception rather, that one reason that the European Union is so silent about human rights abuses in Turkey is because they need Turkey to be a gatekeeper for all these refugees who could potentially flood Europe. And you have that, deal where Europe gives billions to Turkey to keep those refugees, inside Turkey. Do you believe that the changes in Syria and Syria potentially stabilizing and that risk abating over time with a significant number of refugees going back to Syria proper. Do you think that can change things a bit in favor of, democracy, that Turkey will be held under greater scrutiny going forward? I mean, it's all very speculative. I know.
No, it's not. No, it's not speculative. First, we want to have a peaceful Syria, whatever are the conditions in the neighborhood. Meaning, I think the right of the Syrian refugees to come home is as it is, and for that reason, from the European point of view, they are refugees. They are asylum granted persons. But the reluctance to criticize openly the backsliding in democratic standard in Turkey is also linked to the idea that the European Union needs some reassurances from the security point of view. And for that reason, the Turkish authorities are passing the message to everyone in Turkey. Now that these guys of Europe, they need us from the security point of view, we are going to be members. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. If Turkey is not a democracy, there is no other leverage, security, military, energy, whatever you think. If Turkey is not a democracy, Turkey is never going to be a member of the European Union.
Wait, do you really think the AKP wants to become a member of the European Union?
I don't know. I don't know, but as I always say, I don't need love letters. We need deeds. We need facts. Are you complying with the European Court of Human Rights? No. Forget about drones. Forget about geopolitical. Forget about luring the people saying, "No, our military power is opening the gates of the European." It's not going to happen. Your military means are opening the gates of some military programs, of some collaboration, of some NATO or not NATO arrangements regarding security, but for sure it's not helping the country to be a member of the European Union. And it's good that the public opinion in Turkey catch this idea. No shortcuts, no drones. Sometimes the more you are pampered by some European interlocutors saying you are a big partner, you are a very important partner. When you listen to that, you have to think this guy is hiding, that the more we are considered as a partner, the less are we considered as a candidate. And this is the thing that you have to decide. Do you want to be a partner? It's easy. Do you want to be a member of the European Union? It's a little bit more difficult because you have to be a mature, irreversible democracy.
Nacho Sánchez Amor, thank you so very much for joining us here today.
It's my pleasure. Anytime you consider that I could be of use, I'm ready to engage.
Thank you. You are of great use.
Thank you.
And this brings us to the end of this episode of On the Middle East. I hope you'll join me again very soon. And in the meantime, you can go to our website, www.al-monitor.com, for independent and in-depth reporting on the Middle East. Thank you and goodbye.